But I think the trend towards the old local varieties, which can have similar beneficial properties, is probably more interesting.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And this intriguing story is very much taken up by our final guest.
Yeah, and this is Genia from Domaine en Plus near Montpellier.
That's right, spot on. So Genia's story is a fabulous one. She's originally from Lithuania. And was working as a pharmacist in Scotland when she took a trip to Languedoc in 2014, and it changed her life.
This is all sounding very romantic.
Yeah, no, we should be playing some sort of stirring violin music, shouldn't we? I would ask you to sort of
not
fill
personally
in, but
playing.
no, maybe not.
So.
Anyway, Genia fell in love with the culture of violins or no violins. She fell in love with the gastronomy, the beautiful landscapes of Languedoc, and she also fell in love with Thibaut Vermillard, who was starting to renovate his grandfather's old vineyard. They got married, she moved to France, and they launched themselves wholeheartedly into their wine project, part of which involved rescuing ancient grape varieties. So you see where I'm going here.
It's all starting to make sense.
Yeah, so I asked Genia how it all started and tell us a bit more about the project.
Yes, if you would ask me like 10, 15 years ago that one day you will finish at the south of France making wine, I would never believe it. So now today it has been almost 10 years since I'm living in France and working with the vines and making wine. We renovated family vineyards. There was no winery. It was really an interesting journey and now we have a part of the result already of all this work of 10 years.
So that sounds like quite hard work. So, I mean, I can understand you being attracted to the Languedoc climate and landscape and gastronomy, but kind of renovating a family vineyard and winery, what was it about the wine aspect of Languedoc that appealed to you?
Well, when I came to France and Languedoc in particular, I didn't have any wine baggage, wine traditions, and my knowledge was quite low, just like superficial. So it also helped me to have this, freedom and to see the wines in a different way that, for example, at Thibaut, I saw them. And for me, especially when in the beginning we started doing research of different historical wine works in the Languedoc, I was amazed, like what a beautiful diversity Languedoc have. And at the same time, I was a little bit upset. The beautiful diversity has a little bit been lost since 150 to 100 years now. So that two feelings that I had at the moment, and when we talked with Thibaut, when we started to be interested in the historical grape varieties that we wanted to plant in our Domaine en Plus, for me, it was just obvious. It's so interesting and it's nice to preserve the wine heritage for the first time, to give a historical dimension to the terroir that we have here. And also to rediscover a new taste of Languedoc wines.
So let's talk about that then. You're a large part of what you're doing is you're rescuing and reviving ancient Languedoc grape varieties and then making them into wines. Can you just tell me a bit about that? What you're doing and why and how?
Okay, sure. I will start maybe with just a little point with the particularity of our terroir, but because our Domaine en Plus, it's at the east of Languedoc. And the particularity of this place is that we have the terroir, it's a rolled pebbles that were its interface, because we have cultural and geography of Languedoc. We have stones that were brought from Alps, so it's an Alpine origin, and they were brought from Rhone, so it's three forces that has connected in our terroir. It's the same terroir like Châteauneuf-du-Pape appellation, for example. So for us, when we started to looking for grape varieties and choosing what we want to plant, one thing was really important to keep the connection between grape variety and terroir, because they live together, so they need to be well connected and well adapted to each other. That's why also we choose some of the grape varieties that are native from Languedoc and some grape varieties that are from Châteauneuf-du-Pape appellation, like Counoise or Picardon, that comes from Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And in Languedoc, we have also beautiful Picpoul Noir, for example, Terre Noire, Riverangue. So This is a little research that we do and chosen for the first plantations in 2015 and 16. The two main axes, it was one for historical dimension for, this highlight this heritage, and the second one also when we wanted to build vineyard that would be also resilient in facing the climate change, global warming. So also the second aspect was to choose the grape varieties that would be adapted to this one, so we can still do wine tomorrow. So we do a selection on different grapes, and first it was kind of theoretical and historical research and approach, a little bit exchange with another winemakers. Today we can see it a little bit more practical way, because it's been 5 millésimes vintage that we have been vinifying, so we have a little bit experience on that way. And we can say that today, when you have a bigger diversity of grape varieties with different parameters, so it's more interesting to work in terms of global warming. I was listening to your recent podcast about Ventoux appellation, and they were also speaking about Sanso grape variety that has bigger berries, more juice. I absolutely agree with this approach because one of the grapes varieties that I cultivate, it's Riverang. It's a parent of Sanso, and it also has a bigger grape, so it has juiciness. It accumulates less alcohol, so we can also have a lighter bodied wine in Languedoc. We can surprise with our new taste of the wines of Languedoc.
If you were going to choose like one white and one red variety, which you've kind of, old grape variety, which you've sort of are reviving, which is coping particularly well against, which is particularly well adapted for climate change, and also is really interesting for wines, what would you choose if you had to choose just one white, one red?
Well, for the white grape varieties, one of the grapes that we have planted, it's a Picardon grape variety that comes from the Châteauneuf du Pape, and they used to be also largely cultivated in Languedoc, and it almost has disappeared in 2017. There was just less than 1 hectare in France. So it's when we planted, we didn't know exactly the taste, what it's going to do, but it was one little risk that we took, just curious. And actually, every time when I vinificate Picardon, it's really nice structured wine, and it's really a lot of finesse, and you can say that you can compare it to other ones. It has bigger berries, so there is more juiciness. It's quite well adapted to the climate change, but then it's sometimes for one, my choice, it's really personal. It's not neutral objective, but it's a choice that we do. And for the red one, I would go to Picpoul Noir grape variety. So we know much more Picpoul white in Picpoul du Pinet appellation, but this is like a big brother of Picpoul white, because it's an old grape varieties that used to be noir, and with a natural mutation that happens in the nature, it becomes white and the gris and its rosy color. So Picpoul Noir, I choose this variety for one aspect. It can really nicely keep his acidity. It's grape variety that can go to, in terms of maturity, and 13, 14, even 50 degrees if you let it ripe. But at the same time, it will always have a pH, the acidity level really, so pH low and acidity level quite high. And this is nice balance that we can find in the wines with the Picpoul Noir grape variety. So two personal choices, Picardon and Picpoul Noir. This is really a richness of Languedoc. It's a diversity of the terroir and of the grapes. So that's what I choose.
So that's really interesting, rescuing these ancient varieties from the sounds of it, almost from the point of disappearance.
Yeah. And one question I did ask was, how easy is it to sell these virtually unknown grape varieties, thinking, it's virtually impossible. And she said, actually people are really open to buying them, not because they're interested in the technical details, but because people pick up really quickly on the story about reviving local history, about saving grapes from oblivion, she said it really touches people, and they're curious to discover a sort of different side to Languedoc. Not just big dark red wines, but lighter, elegant reds as well. So,
and it's also an added bonus that these varieties seem well adapted to cope with climate change.
Absolutely. So we may well be seeing more and more of this kind of thing in the future. And apparently, Genia was saying the Languedoc appellation rules have changed recently to incorporate this trend too. So producers can now use up to 30% of these historic grape varieties in their blends, alongside traditional varieties like Grenache, Syrah, Carignan, where before it was zero. They weren't allowed to use them, but now they can. They're allowed to sort of incorporate them. So, and that may grow in the future too. Genia said that would strengthen the identity of Languedoc wines even further if that did happen. So
aren't they doing some interesting things on sustainability too?
Yeah, absolutely. So good point. I pretty much put exactly that question to Genia, and here's what she said.
We see the farming, the winemaking as like actor in our ecosystem, in also economical system and environmental. So since couple years, since 2019, we planted new parcels in agroforestry. So we had a good example. For example, in 2019 here in south of France was really heat episode were quite strong, and we observed that the parcels that surrounded by olive trees, we have beautiful 400 years olive trees. So this little ecosystem creates a little bit more freshness in the parcel. So this is also how we plant our new lands. So it's not like one, when you see without ending the vineyards. No, it's more like little plots separated by olive tree that allows to have their own microbiology and symbiose between mycorrhizas and the plants.
So you're planting olive trees in you have rows of vineyards, then every so often you have a row of olive trees.
Every 12 rows of the vineyards, 12 rows vineyards, 1 row of olive tree.
You're finding that helps with the microclimate, sort of almost lower the temperatures or increase the humidity or improve the root systems. Is it doing all those things?
Personally, it's more observation work because we had already all trees, and I know that the trees, they breathe also. So there is a little bit more humidity in the atmosphere around the trees, and also interwork between the racines, the roots. Thank you. So these little factors, multi-factors, I would say, there is no one answer, makes that the microclimates are a little bit more fresh and also more resilient for the diseases or for the heats, even for the frozen, sometimes in the spring. So it's one of the choices that we do. We do organic farming since 2015, but then little by little we add, possibilities, because today I would say that there is no one perfect good answer. Can you adapt to the global warming, climate change? So there are multiple choices that you could do in the farming, and then you adapt what landscape you have, what size also of your estate is. So many different choices.
Genia, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Peter.
So interplanting olive trees with vines helps them cope with heat and drought from climate change, which is fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. Agroforestry, there we are. It does sound like there's something to it. Apparently 15% of AOP Languedoc producers are organic too, which is a high rate in the context.
Yeah.
So lots going on. What I love about Domaine en Pelouse is they're doing great, really innovative work, but very much rooted in local identity and traditions too. And also, typical of one trend in the Languedoc, of kind of younger generation, fresh talent from outside the region, helping affect sort of positive change, and working for a sustainable future. So lots there.
It's a lovely story. Right, so we've got 1 or 2 AOP Languedoc wines to taste and recommend, haven't we, before we finish up? And we're starting with the Château de Lascaux Garrigue Blanc 2021. Now, this is a biodynamic producer based in Pic-Saint-Loup. This white is mainly Vermentino, and it's a classic Southern French white. You've got waxy red apple aromas. It's quite generous. It's spicy. It's got a warming sort of palate with a lovely creamy, easy texture. It's very drinkable. And actually, although I say generous, it's 13% alcohol, so not crazily high alcohol. About £20.
Yeah, it's really nice. Now, we couldn't not recommend a rosé, so I've got the Paul Mas Jardin de Rose Traviata 2022, which is $13.99 from Waitrose. It's quite a sort of fancy flute bottle, isn't it, with a glass top. But it's the wine itself. It's really characterful, isn't it? It's full of juicy dark fruit and sort of rosehip notes. A bit more oomph than you might expect from Provence, for example, which I think is what Languedoc is about. That bit more character, bit more weight. Really sort of satisfying rosé. Paul Mas, obviously, a name many people will recommend. One of the bigger producers in the region.
Now we've also got a series of excellent reds, as you might expect. And first up is the Bergerie du Capucin Les Cent Pas du Berger Rouge 2020. Long name. Love the French.
Gotta earn it.
Just one whiff of this and you are transported straight to the herb-covered, sun-drenched slopes of Languedoc. It's so evocative. You've got really wonderful aromas of wild herbs and some wood smoke, a bit of incense, leathery, dark olives, and then this sort of mouthful of juicy, bittersweet dark berry fruit. It's a classic Languedoc red. I would say ideal for a cassoulet. And so much wine for £16 or about that much.
Absolutely. So I've got another red. It's not dissimilar in style, actually, maybe with even more sort of density and richness. It's the Domaine de Roquemal Les Grès 2020 from Grès de Montpellier, the subzone. Your Capucin was mainly Grenache with some Syrah. This is mainly Syrah with some Grenache and Cinsault. It's a tiny bit more expensive at just over £20, but it's absolutely captivating. It's got aromas of sort of candle wax and plum and sandalwood, and then this really complex, intense, bittersweet palate profile. It's so foodie, just gorgeous.
Yeah, I love that one.
Gorgeous.
And we've got another red from the same area, but different in style. So this is Domaine en Plus, and it's the Languedoc Grès de Montpellier 2022. Now, this is an equal Syrah Grenache blend, but Genier explained their terroir gives freshness to their wines, and this wine captures that perfectly, doesn't it? It's wonderfully refreshing and lifted. You've got some floral, sort of brambly aromas, and then in your mouth you've got that elegance and intensity and persistence, really fine tannins, savoury undertones. There's a lot of savouriness in all of these wines. It's serious, but it's so enjoyable. And again, a great food wine.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, we tried a whole bunch of wines from Montpellier, didn't we?
Yeah, we
did. They were genuinely outstanding.
Yeah.
Not just good, but different, refreshing, sort of characterful, elegant wines.
Yeah, it's sort of pale and lifted and really refreshing.
With such intensity as well. That's really hard to do.
Yeah.
So this is definitely a Languedoc producer to discover, if you don't know them already. Their wines aren't in the UK yet, but hopefully they will be soon. Now, one final tip from me, the Clos des Nines Loré 2020. It's about £22. It's organic. It's another sort of lighter, lifted style that uses a fair bit of Cinsault, which we've discussed. I just think it's lovely to see these really sort of poised, lighter styles coming out of Languedoc now. Still with that bittersweet intensity, so typical of the region, but just with real elegance and lift and grace. It's so exciting.
And one final wine. We couldn't resist, could we, dipping into our own cellar to find an older vintage. And we found one at the back somewhere, covered in dust, looking a bit sorry for itself. It probably hasn't been very well looked after, but we picked it out, and it's the Domaine Les Aurelles Solène 2000.
2000.
And it's stunning, isn't it?
Oh,
it is really testament to how this rugged, wild character of Languedoc Reds can age and develop. It's from the Pézenas subzone, which is quite well known, and I think it's a blend of Carignan and Grenache. But it's just, it's properly aged, and funky,
word,
but
it's just
good.
Yeah, what a glassful. I think Kermit Lynch talks about how the best Languedoc wines penetrate right into one's bloodstream, and I think this is a brilliant example of that. Almost tastes quite bloody, doesn't it? Sort of
meaty
feral.
and
Absolutely, it's just sort of
leathery
wild, but it's also so complex and serious and savoury. I guess it's a real attention grabber, isn't it, of a wine? And that's something we did promise at the outset of this episode, if I'm remembering it rightly.
Indeed, we did. So some wonderfully characterful, elegant, refreshingly different wines there from AOP Languedoc. I think one tip we would give when it comes to Languedoc wines is choose your producer with care. You know, it's the one key to quality in such a diverse region. You know, obviously the wines we've recommended here are good, in our humble opinion. But this is one region to seek out advice and tips. It will definitely sort of fast track your journey to pleasure.
Yeah, and that could be your local wine merchant or whoever. But don't be afraid to ask for advice. It's, you know, the rewards are right there in the glass. One other point to mention is you know, we've mentioned these wines probably work best with food. In fact, Benoit mentioned how good his mum's ratatouille is with Languedoc Red. Rupert recommended cassoulet with the same. You know, we haven't really had time to go into this, but the good news is we will be circling back to this topic in another episode very soon. So keep your eyes peeled and your ears peeled, if such a thing can be done for that one.
So, by way of closing summary, Languedoc is a vibrant, fast-evolving wine region, famous in the past for quantity, but now increasingly associated with diversity, value for money, and characterful wines across a host of styles. Climate change is presenting challenges, which producers are responding to, often in innovative and sometimes surprising ways. This, plus the influx of outsider talent and younger generations, often making their own wine rather than supplying co-ops, is making for a dynamic wine scene very much worthy of your attention.
Now, we'll put all the wine details on our show notes and social media as usual. Thanks to our sponsors, AOP Languedoc, and also our interviewees, Rupert Miller, Rosemary George, Benoit Bertrand, and Genia Vermillard. And of course, thanks to you for listening. Until next time, cheers.